Hello viewers, the first round of the Manufacturers' Cup is upon us, and Polyphony were not messing about with this one. First of all, the race takes place at the fearsome Nurburgring Nordschliefe. It begins in heavy rain, but then progresses into a drier track, but it gets darker, which makes visibility very difficult. And also for good measure, mechanical damage was set to high. The manufacturer I've gone with is the ever-trusty BMW. Let's jump straight in. Okay, the first qualifying session of the event. Now, as you can see, everyone is driving out of the pit lane as you'd normally do in any typical qualifying session. However, there is a very strange bug within Gran Turismo 7 at the moment, whereby if you are the last car on the track on a drying circuit, then you just get a lot more grip than everyone else because the other cars dry the track out for you, if that makes sense. So I crossed the line with only 10 seconds left to go, to make sure that I was the last car on the track, to see if this would work. Now, this didn't work initially because I just went straight on at turn 1, massively making a fool of myself and losing a couple of seconds in the process. But that was more just pure driver error. Luckily enough, around the very long Nurburgring Nordschliefe combined circuit, I had plenty of time to try to catch up with the rest of the pack. As you can see, they were quite a long way ahead of me on this lap, and so I was in no real danger of trying to catch up with anyone, apart from this guy actually, who presumably has some damage somewhere. I was able to get past him quite easily and not lose any time. Now, some guys were beginning to cross the line, setting their fastest laps, 9:15, 9:11, 9:10, and those laps were quite slow given that you could easily get below 9 minutes. And here I was up on the fastest lap, eventually coming up to the line to set an 8:51, which was good enough for second. However, I was ruining my mistake at turn 1. I probably lost 2 seconds on that first corner, but I think the plan worked to go last and get the drier track. Take a look at the weather radar. So the race is going to start off wet, it's going to dry out. So yes, as you could probably tell with that cloud, the rain was coming down before the race, but it would slowly dissipate and become dry later on. But for now, our main concern was with just trying to stay in second place. We qualified pretty well, and it's really a job of trying to just not trip over one of the many pitfalls that were possible on this race. Polyphony really weren't messing about with this one, trying to make it as difficult as possible. It was very treacherous. As you can see, just dipping into the wet weather territory. However, I am on Inter tyres, with the intention that the track will dry out a little bit over time, and so that will become the best tyre. Now, the BMW certainly wasn't the best car in these conditions. It felt a bit boaty, which you could actually say is a good thing in wet weather, but it actually didn't handle that well, and the traction wasn't the best. As you can see, this is the end of the first lap. The Porsche in the lead just shot off into the distance. 7 seconds into the lead here at the end of lap 1. Now, coming through Galgenkopf onto the back straight, I just made a really innocuous error, and it was so easy to do that, to drop the back end and to spin into the barrier. And now I had to painlessly watch, or very painfully, sorry, watch everyone sail by as I surrendered second place, eventually dropping here down to 12th, 10 positions lost from one mistake and front bumper damage sustained on the car. So I now had to perform something of a comeback. Now, we've touched upon the fact that the cars at the back of the pack, in drying conditions, which this is, the track is drying out, you have more grip. And so this was just a really weird scenario where at this point here I'm 15 seconds off the lead, and I'm actually gaining on him despite having to fight through traffic. This bug is just so strange. You just get so much more grip the further back in the pack you are. It is very, very unusual, and I was just trying to capitalise on it as much as possible here as we then move up into 9th position, up now behind the Nissan GTR. As you can see, it's a very close-knit race. The leader was a good maybe 5-6 seconds in front, but just look at this group. Incredibly close. This bug just brings pretty much everyone together into one big group, and this actually made this race even more difficult because now you have the added factor of, well, everyone's right next to each other and we could potentially crash just like this Supra does. on this corner, losing the position. It was really easy just to go into the back of someone, get bumper damage, someone will go into the back of you, that kind of thing. So there are many, many pitfalls here. Onto the Dottinger for the second time, able to go past the Nissan GTR quite comfortably. The BMW has decent straight line speed. At the end of lap 2, pretty much everyone goes into the pit lane to change over to the medium tyre, having to repair the aerodynamic damage there on the car, so losing a little bit of time there. This was another very treacherous part of the race, coming out of the pit lane on slick tyres, dry weather tyres, on this wet weather, on this wet surface, and you see everyone pretty much spinning. I gained 3 positions, near enough, in 2 corners. Pretty much everyone caught out by the very difficult conditions on the pit exit. And now I'm inside this Genesis, and this created a very annoying moment where he just drifted wide here onto the wet weather bit and slid back onto the left and pushes me into the gravel, and so begins or continues my unravelling, as after all of that, fighting back to 4th near enough, back to now 10th, but it's about to get even worse here, down at the 7th corner on lap number 3. The Supra behind just comes out of nowhere, just dives up the inside and pushes me wide onto the wet surface, and it wasn't the most polite move of all time, let's put it that way, just edging me wide onto the wet patch, and that was that. It didn't take long though for me to catch back up and for him to surrender the position as he just forgets to brake at the NGK chicane here at the end of the Grand Prix loop. Now, I had to make something of another recovery here, as we're up behind the Nissan GTR, which is very good handling wise, but doesn't seem to have the best straight line speed. Very brave move around the outside through Schwedenkreuz, moving up into 8th. This was a really good battle here. I actually really enjoyed this bit. Up behind the Lexus, and we're both going to get the run here. I'm going to bump draft him and push him through and move up into 7th. Looking for 6th place now on the run up towards the carousel. Side by side into Muck Curve. Very fast and fearsome left-hander. You see the track is pretty much dry now. There's no wet patches per se, but you still have to be very careful. And then into this right-hander. He just backs out in time. And I'm around the outside into 6th position. And this is the end of lap number 3 on the back straight. The recovery drive is continuing here. The Genesis very good in a straight line, and I wasn't really able to overhaul him, as we both catch up massively with this Finnish driver, who presumably had a lot of damage, because that is not very good straight line speed from them. Eventually I was able to go up the inside at turn 1, lap number 4 for P4, and that would pretty much be that. I felt like I was able to, pace-wise, win this race or be in the battle for the lead. However, 4th place was to be my destiny. I did have a good race catching up with the guy in 3rd, who, as you can see, just in front. So this was a race where I certainly had lots of mistakes and accidents, but eventually finishing 4th, which wasn't too bad of a recovery drive. Eventually getting myself a grand total of 242 points for that, which, well, we can definitely do better. We can definitely do better. Alright, we're in the lobby. Race number 2. Let's do a better job here. How many points? 302 for first. We're going to run the same strategy in qualifying, going out last, and then seeing what we can do. Try to start near the front. You can see here, everyone's playing the waiting game once again. I think everyone's clocked on to what's going on here with this wet weather. And I guess that's normally what happens in these manufacturer races. People work out the best strategies by the 2nd or 3rd attempt. And this now on the 2nd attempt, I was actually timing this really well. I was crossing the line here with 4 seconds to go in the lap. Let's try not to make this same mistake down into the first braking zone. Really easy to make a mistake on this qualifying lap with the dry line, the wet lines as well, or the wet patch. Do not want to touch any of them, otherwise you will just be sailing wide endlessly into the wall, into the barrier. Now, at the end of this lap, it was a good lap, pushing nice and hard, trying to catch up with the cars in front. I pretty much timed it to perfection to be the last car on the track once again. And so I felt like I was definitely capitalising on this weird bug, which I think is pretty well known and documented now within the community. Luckily, this guy moved right out of the way, so very, very polite driving from that guy to move aside on the qualifying lap. My primary mistake on my lap was this one here, and luckily enough I was able to recover it well enough and early enough just to glance off the wall and not turn that into a full-on spin. And so that could have been completely the end of my lap. However, it wasn't, so I was able to continue here, setting a purple, aiming for a 950, and that's pretty much exactly what I was to do, coming home to finish P1. Come on, that's P1, baby. Get in there, Lewis. Okay, here we go, guys. You know what? I think this can actually be very difficult because Porsche behind is very good in these conditions at the beginning. But yeah, I'm a little bit worried about that Porsche behind. It's going to be quick in these conditions. The BMW is not strong, I don't think, in these wet weather conditions. So I just need to, like, survive, keep them behind, hopefully get to the Nordschleife, get off the GP loop in the lead, and then I can kind of block them from there. But let's do this. Let's get into it. So yes, attempt number 2, starting from first place. And as I kind of just touched upon there, my primary worry was that Porsche behind with really good traction. And so this was going to be a difficult opener to this race. Obviously in the lead, in changing conditions is never easy because you're the first to kind of judge the conditions. And then of course we have the bug where if you're the car at the front, you seem to have less grip than everyone else. So multiple things working against you here, but we're just going to really park our car in all the correct places from my point of view, all the wrong places from the car behind point of view. Just trying to make this car as wide as possible. I mean, it is quite a big car, the M6 GT3. We're going to make it even bigger by parking it in the correct positions and just really not allowing any of the cars behind to get the better of me position-wise. Really imperative that we weather the storm, so to speak, on the initial run here in the worst conditions for this car. Once we get into the dry by sort of end of lap 2, then we'll be in a much stronger position in terms of how our car operates. So far it's been okay. It's quite treacherous, just really trying to not make any mistake under immediate pressure. You can see on the radar bottom right, this Frenchman in the Porsche was very close in attendance. I turned on traction control by this point. It definitely felt like the better option to have it on in these conditions, especially in this car which seems to really want to spin up its wheels at any opportunity. So I turned traction control onto 1 and it seemed to really just really hunker the rear end of the car down on the exit of the corners. Not there though. It was really easy to have these moments, and let me assure you that driving for about 20 minutes in these wet weather conditions was so difficult without crashing. On the exit here, look at this. Coming down the hill, on this slight kink to the right, not really much of a corner. However, in these conditions, almost losing control, turning it into a D1 GP session with an almighty drift. I'm sure the judges would have loved that one. As we head into Hatzenbach for the first time. On the Nordschleife now, of course, this is definitely a lot more narrow and therefore a little bit easier to keep cars behind. However, it's not impossible to overtake, and so my job isn't exactly easy at this point. So staying in first position, in slightly higher gears just to keep the traction on the exit of the corners. So as you can see, still constant pressure from the car behind, and it was just something to certainly think about. Normally around this track, in the dry conditions anyway, if someone's right behind you, you can kind of just drive your line and they can't really get past, as long as you're not going too slow. If your pace is decent, then they're going to really struggle. However, here in the wet weather conditions, I just knew that, you know, this Porsche could get a good set of tractions on the exit of one of the corners. That does not make sense, but it could pretty much outdrag me coming out of a corner if you got the line right. And so I really had to be diligent here and just not make a mistake, especially given the pack was so close. with the weird bug. Now here, this was just a really interesting moment as I go a little bit too wide on the carousel, going beyond the banking, and luckily enough just being able to keep the lead of the race. But look, in third place, there's a Porsche which I didn't really account for, has just come through from somewhere in the mid-pack or the back of the pack up into third place, and has really capitalised on that Porsche's speed in these conditions, and also the bug, which we are going to keep talking about because it is hindering my performance right now, being at the front of the pack, drying the track out for everyone else. I mean, I suppose it is true in real life that, you know, if you're the first person into the wet weather, then you do dry the track out for everyone else behind you, but not as strong as it is in this game right now. It's like way too strong of a thing, and I'd assume that Polyphony are aware of this, but whether or not they do something about it, I do not know. So on to the Dottinger for the first time, still in the lead with enough of a gap, I think, here to stay ahead. I mean, we'll see. This is going to be very close. The pack behind, as you can see, in very close contention, and so this made things very pressured in the sense that any mistake would probably be punished by being overtaken by many cars. On this occasion, luckily enough, I was only overtaken once, and so dropping down to second, and it's this Porsche. I mean, this guy just came through from out of nowhere, seemingly, and still this guy behind has not been able to get past, and this other guy has just come through and just overtaken all of us. Kind of crazy how that's happened. We're going to try and go for the immediate reply. On the GP section of the track, it is often easier to overtake, and we're looking up the inside here into the big braking zone at turn 1, really trying to capitalise on that apex. Look at the radar, there's about 7 or 8 cars in the span of the radar, so it just shows you how ridiculously close this race is, and it really does become quite dangerous when so many cars in testing conditions, everyone's jostling for position. It's so easy to get caught up in an accident when it's like this. So still here, frustrating the Frenchman behind, who's not able to get past. It's been a long 10 minutes for this guy in third now. There he is, trying to get past, just not able to do it. And then the German there in the lead on home territory, able to just to jump by the pair of us and more and get into the lead and now pull away. Now the thing counting in my favour now, I suppose, is now that I'm not in the lead, the guy at the front is now drying out the track and will not be able to pull away. That guy is clearly quicker and should really be able to edge out a big gap, but just, you'll see, it just doesn't quite happen for him. Now this guy does go up the inside and is not able to quite capitalise on that positioning, and I'm able to old switcheroo him and come back around the outside and move back into second place with the pack in very close contention behind. And so I'll be very thankful to get off of the Grand Prix loop onto the Nordschleife, where it's slightly easier to defend, and try my best to try to keep up with the Porsche there in the lead. So this race was just such a good race. I think Polyphony really nailed it with this one, and it just shows you what is possible with Gran Turismo 7 when I think a bit of thought goes into these races. And this is certainly one of the best races, or most enjoyable races, that I've had in the game. It was just so well designed, and this kind of race comes up every now and then. You know, you get one of these very special races. I kind of wish they put more into the daily races and design them maybe with, you know, this kind of thing in mind, as those can get a little bit more repetitive. But we're having a lot of fun here, still in second, and keeping up, as we can see, with the Porsche in the lead. We've now got Mike behind in the Subaru BRZ, and this is the guy who won the first race, and he actually started that race at the back. And so we definitely understand this guy's credentials. He's fast, and he has potential to win the race even if he isn't starting at the front. And so as we wind round the mini carousel there, in towards Galgenkopf the second time, the Galgenkopf being this long but very important right-hander which drops down onto the Dottinger, the long straight here. I am firmly within slipstream range, and this is surely going to be an overtake here on this straight. Porsche trying to drive off on the wet line, trying to put me off. But I'm just going to follow him all the way as he moves from left to right across the circuit. We're going to follow him in the slipstream and not relinquish the slipstream at all until we pull out and move into the lead of the race. So we did all we had to do there, capitalising on the extra grip we get for being behind, and then just making the most of the BMW's straight line speed on the straight, moving back into the lead at a timely time, because we are just about to jump into the pit lane. The BMW boys will work their magic, and we're going to go over onto the medium tyres once again. So there we go. I say once again, we did it in the first race, of course, not in this race. So there we go, into the pit box, onto the mediums, and once more, we have to be extremely careful here on the exit of the pit lane, as this bit of the track is wet. We are on dry tyres. Got to be really careful, just tiptoe here into this corner, back onto the dry line. There we go. And we drop down through turn 1 and then into turn 2. I mean, it's basically like an ice skating rink. And at this point, I'm guessing that Porsche that was in the lead just a moment ago is now dropping down the order and must have made a mistake on the pit exit. And it just shows you the pitfalls of this race. It was so easy to make one mistake, which was catastrophic to your result. And so we are surviving here. We've done a good job so far under very testing conditions, not only from the weather and the track, but also from the cars behind who are trying to do everything to beat you. And so here, the race began to somewhat settle down in the sense that the grip bug no longer was bringing us all together, and the pack began to spread out slightly, albeit now with the close attentions of Mike, as the weather now becomes slightly drier, not really many clouds in the sky. There's not forecast to be any more rain in the race, but of course the decreasing visibility now that the sun has gone behind the horizon. It's just something that happens every day for those of you science nerds who I'm sure you'll be aware of that fact. In fact, it happens every day that the sun disappears and it comes back eventually in the morning. Well, actually, I mean, at the Nurburgring it would, but I suppose if you're on the North Pole or something, then maybe that isn't true. So please clarify that in the comments. Anyway, onto the Nordschleife, lap number 3. We're near enough halfway into this race. It is quite a lengthy race, this one, roughly 45 minutes in length. But here, Mike is going to take a trip into the wall on the left-hand side. And it was really difficult to judge. There are still wet patches, as you can see, on the extremities of the circuit. And you had to watch out for the curbs as well, as the curbs kind of fill up with water, and they are often the last things to dry out. You have to be really careful with certain curbs. I think at this point the curbs are dry, but it's not always easy to know exactly when they do dry out and when you should use them. Around the Nürburgring there aren't many curbs you should use, and there aren't many barriers you should grind off like that. So I had a comfortable gap there after Mike's crash, but it came back. Luckily, no damage sustained in that incident. And so Mike left ruining the possibilities of what could have been if I had some big damage there, as there were no more pit stops in the race. So any more damage sustained now would be carried to the end of the race, and therefore would really put you in a bad situation, having to carry damage, and you know, you're just going to lose straight line speed if you have that, and therefore you'd be a sitting duck on this straight that we're coming up to now. I had a 1 second margin here to Mike. So this guy was quick, but he wasn't quite able to keep up with me on this lap. I was especially strong after the carousel on that section of the circuit, so just able to open up that gap. Now with Keane in second place in the Genesis, and this was the car I think that I had to really worry about. Genesis has been something of a strong contender in Group 3 of late, and having gone to the Barcelona World Finals recently, they are a key sponsor of Gran Turismo, and it makes you wonder if that is a contributing factor to the car now being extremely competitive in the game. And so this car was definitely one to be reckoned with. The BMW in itself is a strong car, there's no question about that. The Genesis is one that you're always going to have a tough fight against. And so this was not going to be easy from here to the end of the race. 2 more laps remaining. We're still going to be driving for another 19 minutes or so from here to the end. And with this car in very close attendance immediately behind, you can see that it becomes incredibly distracting with the double headlights of my own headlights and then his headlights flashing around behind me. And so just trying to get visual confirmation of braking points and things like that going into corners, it can just really put you off with all this dazzling and flashing that seems to be happening all over the place. And so we're going to do our best to really focus. I think I've done a good job so far in this race of not losing control of the car in very testing circumstances. And so the testing circumstances are very much continuing here in a different form. It just seemed like the race was developing slowly in different ways. So at the beginning, of course, you have the wet weather, you have the drying line, you have the cars being bunched together because of the bug, you have the wet lines and the dry lines, you have the minimizing visibility because of the darkness, and then you have heavy damage. There were just so many things, and there's so many things that were there to possibly be a spanner in the works. And that's what made this a very intriguing and difficult race, but one that was thoroughly enjoyable. So here, rising up towards Flugplatz, lap number 4, carrying a lot of speed through here, and I was thinking that this guy is surely targeting this section of the circuit as somewhere where he could possibly overtake. The Genesis very good in a straight line, and this is a lengthy section of flat out part of the track, and he has a bit of a look there into Schwedenkreuz, very fast and fearsome left hand corner over a crest, flashing the lights as we go into the corner that I forget the damn name of. Oh my goodness, that's not very good of me, is it? As we head down the hill towards the foxhole and now into Bergwerk, another section of the track which has long sustained flat out acceleration. And so with the Genesis now immediately behind me, I was thinking, okay, this could be a bit of the track where he's going to target trying to get past, nearly side by side here as we head up the hill towards Muttkurve for the 4th time. Mike there in the background, just maybe 2 or 3 seconds off, just slowly admiring this battle from a bit of a distance, but still definitely in with a shout should things go wrong for the pair of us here. As we go through Muttkurve, managing to stay ahead. And now let's take a look at the gap here, 0.91 second, 1.1. As we go through Hohe Acht here at the top of the hill, the highest point on the track. And this is the point, or the part of the track, where I really felt quite strong. The BMW felt good, this fast sweeping corners, no real traction zones and no real slow corners, which I think are the primary weaknesses of this BMW M6 GT3. And so through here I was really trying to capitalise on the car, really trying to lean on it. By now the track is fully dry, albeit with lower visibility because of the darkness, of course. And so there's a combination here of really trying to push but not trying to make that mistake as well at the same time. And so that gap began to just slowly increase from 0.9 coming out of the carousel to now 1.2. So really fine margins here, just a couple of tenths. And this is so important because we are now coming up to the very long Döttinger Höhe, and that is the straight where pretty much all of the action and overtaking happened. And so if I can just keep this gap above a second, then he should be out of slipstream range and will not be able to overtake me from that far back. So these are very important corners and could be decisive for this race. As we go through this left-hander, not my strongest corner on the track, a bit wide, lose a tenth or two there, but it's here where the real mistake comes. On the exit of the mini carousel, the car just fades away, the grip is lost. Thankfully I managed to recover the slide, however the gap comes down now to 0.4, 0.2. Through here I just ease off the power to really minimise that gap, so he doesn't really get much of a run on me. I kind of accepted by that point that he would be in the slipstream range, but if you can just get him to be immediately behind you without a run, then that doesn't help his cause. But he actually backed off slightly as well, and as you can see he's going to get momentum here and is easily going to be able to sail by. I'm going to move to the left and cover this left hand side. It's going to work in my favour as we go under the bridge, but the Genesis just has too much power at this point. I'm going to have to tuck back in and try to fight back here with 1 lap remaining in the race. I mean, it's been 35, nearly 36 minutes of action so far in this race, and we are battling for the lead still with 1 lap left to go. It's an amazing battle as we get a bit of a moment on the exit there, grinding off the barrier, trying to get a good exit, which could have propelled me into a position to overtake into turn 1. However, from this far back, it's going to be dive bomb of the century, which is not advisable at this point in the race. So we're going to tuck back in and try to keep this man within arm's length. We don't want him to get away. And I suppose my main opportunity now is to stick with him, make sure he does not get away, and potentially slipstream back past at the end of the race at the Dottinger on the final lap, which we are now on, lap 5 of 5. And so the race is very much in the balance here, but he is just beginning to edge clear. As you can see, the gap now up to 0.6, near enough 0.7. So these are really important moments here for this race. I really have to keep with him. If he just pulls away out that slipstream range, it could be terminal, it could be game over. And so really important moments here, as Mike, now 1.7 seconds behind, has been a good challenger in the race so far, but not quite able to keep up the pace in the latter stages here. I'm not sure what happened to the German who got into the lead at the beginning, or at the end of lap number 1, but he certainly isn't in the top 8. And the Frenchman who was behind me immediately at the beginning is now in 6th position, and therefore hasn't quite been able to capitalise on that Porsche as the race has developed. So through the NGK chicane here at the end of the GP for the final time, turning left onto the Nordschleife, and then on this descent here through Sabine Schmidt's curve for the final time. Gap remaining at 0.6 through Flugplatz for the last time, and the gap comes down to 0.4. This is good because I'm in slipstream range here on this straight line section, or flat out section should I say. Bruce Friedenkreuz gaining, even on the brakes as well. It seems like the BMW perhaps has better brakes, as we catch right up 0.2 the gap, or 0.3. And so I'm just reminding this guy, look, I'm still in this race. I know you've overtaken me, you're in a strong car there, but I absolutely still have a chance of winning this. I'm not going to let it go. But we do make a mistake, and through this little section of the lap, I just began to just make a couple of errors, some mistakes just creeping into the race, and really not at a good time. Gap goes back up to 0.8. Here, just drive a little bit too wide. That compromises me through this right, and the gap goes up to 1.3, which is the biggest it's been. That is the biggest margin I've seen this Genesis pull out, and so this is worrying times. So I really do have to start driving properly and begin to reel that gap back in, and ideally before Bergwerk, which is a corner coming up in about 45 seconds time, or less than that, which then, well, actually look at that, it has a massive moment on the exit of that corner, the slowest corner on the track near enough, or one of, and that comes back down to 0.9. So Bergwerk is coming up in a moment. We have a fearsome fast left-hander coming up, Niki Lauda curve, where he had his crash back in 1976, this corner here. As we then hit the brakes, hit the anchors into Bergwerk, very important corner this one, and I think I've just about done it. Gap 0.7 or less than into the slipstream, and I'm able to gain. So really important moments there, getting that slipstream range and gaining back. The gap comes back down to 0.3. So this one is really in the balance here, really close race. He makes a mistake here. I was hoping that he might have just drifted wide into the wall or something and get some damage, but driving just about on the limit and not enough over it to force a crash. Right behind him through Plantsgarden, forcing him potentially into an error, but he's just not having any of it. He's driving very well at this point in time. Being right behind him, I've got the benefit of being able to sort of dazzle him with the headlights and just put him off, but he's not seemingly falling for anything at the moment. As we approach the final sector of the race, it really is boiling up. This is a very important part of the race now. Can I keep within slipstream range here and get past on the Dottinger for the final time? as we then head up towards Galgenkopf. Again, very important that I get a good exit here within a good range. I don't want to be too close. I need to get some momentum here. We're going to try and leave it about this point here. The gap is at 0.2. Into the slipstream we go, and this is it, guys. Final lap, final straight. We're going to pull out alongside. It's a drag race between Genesis and BMW, side by side on the final lap, coming up towards the last couple of corners after 45 minutes of racing. It's a direct duel between the two brands, and it looks like the Genesis has just got the extra legs there to pull back. I had the slipstream, but now the Genesis has the extra power to come back at me and move back into the lead of the race. We're hoping for a mistake now, or an almighty dive bomb. It's not quite going to happen. Into the final braking zone of the lap, and coming through onto the exit of the corner, onto the power, big slide. I follow him into the slide, and that is that. It's going to be a second after an absolutely incredible battle, and as frustrating as that is to be second, what a race it was. Oh my god, what a race. Just couldn't quite do it. That Genesis was so fast. But what a race that was. Incredible stuff. Might be one of the best I've had on this game. I know I say that quite a lot, but that was genuinely epic. 44 minutes and we were head to head on the final straight. Oh man.